I want to say that trauma is not a rite of passage. A lot of us in this room have been through academic hazing, and that stuff is real, and master's and PhD programs, right? And again, we justify it by saying, oh, I'm just preparing my students for what's to come. I want my students to be prepared, but we have to trust our students, right? Like we have to tell our students about the environments that we're going into. We have to try to get them to empathize with the people that are creating those circumstances so that they can understand how to disrupt them when they get the positions. Because when our students become the CEOs and when they become the politicians, when they become the superintendents, we can't let them share this message, right? Like trauma, we can't let them share trauma in the name of work ethic, in the name of preparing students.
We are delighted and welcome Jordan H. Davis this year as our opening keynote speaker for the event. Jordan H. Davis, affectionately known as JD, is the founder and CEO of JD Speaks, as well as a professional speaker, higher ed practitioner, and self-proclaimed home chef. Known as education's go-to speaker, he addresses all topics related to student success. These topics include, but are not limited to, college readiness, equity and inclusion, and personal and professional development. At just 24 years old, JD has over 6 years of professional speaking experience, having delivered a TEDx talk and addressed audiences of over 13,000. Once a struggling student with piles of college rejection letters, Jordan is now a first-generation college grad and is on track to earn his master's degree in learning, design, and technology from Georgetown University. He teaches students design thinking as a useful tool for academic success, personal development, and social change, while also teaching educators how to create transformative learning environments. His youthful energy, inspiring story, and experience in higher ed make him relatable to all audiences. Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, Jordan started his speaking career in Baltimore area schools and has been expanding ever since. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Jordan H. Davis.
Maryland Common Ground, how y'all doing this afternoon? Oh, come on, I need a little more than that. How y'all doing this afternoon? All right, good. Now, I want to start by channeling the words of a good friend of mine, Dr. Femi Ogundele. And he likes to say, when we do equity work, a lot of it is like preaching to the choir, but sometimes the choir needs practice, right? And so we're here to practice today when we go out back into our schools, into our school districts, into our communities. We need some common language, right? This conference is called Common Ground, right? And so as a keynote, I kind of want to provide some common ground for us today as we talk about the importance of education with family members, with other teachers, and with our students. Also want to acknowledge that today is the first day of Ramadan. So for those who are fasting and who are acknowledging the holiday, I just want to say that you are top of mind for me, and I give you my strength and my spirit. And as I do that, I actually want us in kind of the spirit of this talk, I actually want us to do a little bit of embodiment, right? So I want everybody to just close their eyes. Everybody close your eyes. If you're not comfortable with closing your eyes, feel free to fixate at a specific point in the room. And I want you to start by allowing your mind to focus on the bottoms of your feet hitting the soles of your shoes. Just feel that sensation. The soles of your shoes hitting the bottom of your feet. Might want to wiggle your toes a little bit, right? I want you to transfer that consciousness up through your ankles into your knees, which might be a little tight from the far drive yesterday, right? I want you to transfer that feeling up the back of your legs as they grace your seat. I want you to transfer that feeling up to your backside and into your lower back. Transfer that feeling up through your lower back and into your upper back. Right? There might be a little tightness there. If it is, give it a little love, right? Transfer that feeling to your shoulders. You might want to roll them out a little bit. Right? Move your shoulders, get those loose. Now transfer that consciousness to your neck. Might want to move your head from side to side and just loosen that for me. And now I want you to focus on your mind. I know that some people that are under the sound of my voice might be experiencing some stress, some anxiousness, right? Maybe you burned the roof of your mouth drinking coffee this morning. I know we've been through some experiences already, right? And so I want you to think about all of the things that are going on in your mind right now. This stress could be related to home. It could be related to your professional work, your kids, your friends, your relationships. We all got a lot going on right now. And as you keep your eyes closed and you stay present with me, I want you to imagine that you have a duffel bag sitting to the right of you, just sitting on the floor. I want you to imagine reaching down and opening that duffel bag. And then one by one, I want you to place some of those things into the duffel bag. Some of those negative experiences that we might be carrying into this space right now. Some of that stress that I talked about earlier, right? That anxiousness that's related to the life stressors that we all have. I want you to slowly put those things one by one into that duffel bag. Yep, and as we do that, as we put the final things into that bag, feel free to reach down, close that bag, and to softly slide it underneath your chair. I know these problems are not going anywhere. They're completely valid. They're completely valid things to have on our minds right now. But hopefully for the next 45 minutes and for the duration of this conference, we can practice being present. Because whether we believe it or not, this collection of people, this collection of experiences, life experiences inside of our schools, the combination of intellectual power in this room might never come together again. This same collection of people, the likelihood of all of us being in this environment together is very low, the likelihood of that, right? So I want us to cherish the opportunity to be able to connect with each other today. Now, feel free to open your eyes. You can come back to me. All right, thank you so much for engaging. And now that we are fully present in this environment, if you are excited to engage in Maryland Common Ground 2024, I want you to make as much noise right now as you possibly can. Come on, come on, come on. No, come on. I need more than that. Come on, I need more than that. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so as y'all know now, I am a very engaging speaker, right? So I want you to free your body because I do a lot of professional development stuff, and the go-to thing for a lot of educators, sit just like that. Right? So I want you to feel free to move your body. If you want to stand up and stretch your legs as I talk, I don't take that as a sign of disrespect. Feel free to do that. If you want to take your camera out and take pictures, that's completely fine. Just make sure that you use the hashtag JD Speaks when you post it on Facebook and Instagram, right? If you want to reach down and take notes, that's completely fine. If you want to pull out your phone and do that too, I know you're not cheating or nothing like that. I know you're just taking notes, right? So feel free to engage in any way that works best for you. Now I have a question for all of us to consider. Why do students who love to learn hate school? I want us to really think about that question for a second. Just let that settle in a little bit. Why do students who love to learn hate school? Oh, thank y'all for answering. I appreciate that. Yeah. I vibe with that. I love it. Now, I actually asked, this is a selfish question. I was one of those students who hated school, right? And I got the chance to explore this question in my senior year at Randallstown High School. Anybody from Baltimore County in the building? Baltimore County? Okay. Baltimore County, I see you. And so as a student at Randallstown High School, I had the opportunity to explore this question in a senior research project. A research class that I didn't even want to be in, Like my library media specialist signed me up against my will to like be in this research class. I thought I was too cool for school. I was a star athlete on the football team. I knew I was going to go play college football. I was cruising my senior year. The last thing I wanted to do was a research project. But I had a library media specialist who sat down and worked with me, right? And she allowed me to ask a question that was a little bit resistive, right? A question that might cause some trouble for some people, right? And what I realized in my time, really the genesis of this question is that no matter who I talked to in the school, whether it was the guys on the football team, whether it was the students in the AVID programs, right? Whether it was the valedictorian or the students on the principal's list, no matter who I talked to, no matter what level of academic excellence they were at, each one of them had a certain level of disdain for school. And I started to ask, why is that? Why is it that the students who earn straight A's in school still disdain it? They still don't like the process of it. And so I said, there has to be something greater to this. And so I did this survey all across the school, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th graders. I asked as many students as I possibly could. And the number one reason why students who love to learn hate school, according to the students themselves, is because they felt like the things that they were learning in the curriculum didn't relate to their lives outside of school. That was the number one reason why students said that they hated school. I was like, let's go. I got the answer. Let's go travel to some conferences and share it with our educators, right? Because our educators might need to hear this too. So over the past several years, I've traveled all across the country, mind you, with the help of a lot of my educators from high school, right? Like putting me in the positions at the leadership conferences, right? Like at the education technology conferences, as a 16, 17-year-old student, giving these talks to educators about what it takes to actually engage students. And without those educators seeing that in me, I wouldn't be here today, right? And through these experiences, I took my speaking all throughout undergraduate, right? And as I started to progress in my speaking career, I had more and more engagements. I started to reflect on my journey, and I realized that as my speaking career progressed, as I started to deliver a TEDx talk, as I had a speech in front of thousands of students in Anaheim, California. I spoke to 13,000 students this past summer in Atlanta. As I started to get further into my speaking career talking about education, my message started to change. And so what I started to speak about in the beginning, which was educational transformation and how to support students in learning, I was instead talking about student development. I was speaking directly to the students, but it wasn't a message of encouragement. It was a message of grind culture. It was a message of normalizing sleep deprivation. It was a message of getting students to compete against each other in order to motivate each other, because that's what I saw as I looked at the motivational speakers that were doing the work that I envisioned myself doing. I started to internalize this message around work ethic and having to grind myself into the ground in order to be successful, because as a first generation college student that was away from home for the first time, I felt like that's what I needed to do in order to survive. But as I reflect back on my speaking journey, I realized that our students deserve to do more than just survive. And it took a global pandemic for me to sit down and really reflect on my message and what I was sharing. Did I really believe that education was capable of changing still? Like the message that I had at the beginning about changing the curriculum and making our teaching practices more engaging, now I was talking to students directly as if they were the problem. And so I had to look myself in the mirror and say, Jordan, what do you really believe? Are you trying to be a top motivational speaker, or are you trying to change lives through education? And it wasn't until that moment that I really started to reflect, okay, the curriculum is slow to change. It don't really change that often. And then telling students to grind harder and to work harder and to be self-motivated, that answer wasn't really working either. So what else can we do to help students? I started to look at the classroom as a place for our ideas to be more generative, right? And I started to think about how I can use my skills in communication to help educators refine their practice. So that takes me to Georgetown University, where I do a lot of professional development work with our faculty. And I'm talking like our tenure line faculty that have been teaching for 20 plus years to like our first year adjunct faculty that are teaching on the side. And what I learned through pouring through the teaching and learning research, being in one-on-one consultations with faculty about their courses, right? Learning from faculty from all over the world. Georgetown is a very global campus, a very global university. What I realized in all of this time is that the magic of education is actually at this intersection. The magic of engaging classes is at the intersection of classroom climate, content, and pedagogy. And if you want to be an effective educator in 2024, you cannot miss out on either one of these places. If one of these things is off, something is off with your class. Like if you have the content and the pedagogy, but the climate isn't so that students actually feel compelled to participate, that they don't feel compelled to collaborate, then the pedagogy is going to be lost. The learning is going to be lost. You are actively losing out on learning opportunities if these three things are not intact. And I have a lot of educators in the room that have certificates and degrees, and like, y'all probably know this stuff already. But what I want to talk about today is what makes it difficult. What makes it difficult to hit this beautiful intersection that we know is effective through the research, through the professional development that we're already engaged in? Like, what makes it difficult for educators and faculty to reach this happy intersection? Well, for college faculty, it looks a little bit different than K through 12. So I want to walk through some examples. I was actually sitting at a roundtable discussion at the American Association of Colleges and Universities. They have an annual conference. Most of the times it's in DC. So I was able to go to that. I'm sitting at a table with academic deans and vice provosts for equity and inclusion from around the country. And I'm going through these different practices that I see professors at Georgetown University cultivating in their courses that are really effective. And one of the deans, he speaks up, he says, "Jordan, all of this makes perfect sense, but why don't faculty do it?" And I started to outline some examples. First of all, there's no practice. You think about the day in the life of a college faculty member, they're on campus for about 90 minutes a week, like a week. And in that time, they're in class for about 80 of those minutes, right? Like the 5 minutes getting out of their car and walking across campus and then the 5 minutes going back. Everything else is spent in the classroom with students. They might have a departmental meeting once a month, right? But there's no community among the faculty. Like a college professor can go into a class and not even experience the teaching, the teaching stories and the teaching practices of the person that has the office next to them throughout the entire semester, right? So that's one of the problems that I face in my work. Then there's no community. A lot of faculty that teach in higher ed, they do it part-time. So they got full-time jobs, they got families, a lot of them teaching online. And so there isn't an intentional focus on community. There's no training. A lot of college professors are trained to be researchers. They're not trained to be teachers. And they might have about 10 minutes of their time in new faculty orientation devoted to inclusive teaching. Outside of that, they might not encounter it at all, right? A lot of this stuff in higher ed is not required in the same way that it is in K-12. And then lastly, the time and incentives. Again, they're incentivized to publish. They're incentivized to put out research. And so how can we disrupt this, right? And so professors, if I had to draw this happy medium, it looks like this. Super heavy on the content. Like no question they know what they're talking about. But it's the climate and the pedagogy that needs work. All right, now with our K through 12 teachers that aren't fitting in this medium, usually they fall in the pedagogy, right? Like very baked in like the practices of teaching. Like they can tell you about, Piaget and Vygotsky, and some might even be familiar with bell hooks and, Paulo Freire, and like they can quote out the wazoo, right? And they can go in their class and they know the types of assignments that might engage students. But there's not really that many opportunities to think deeply about the climate of the classroom, or to think deeply about how you can disrupt the content that's essentially delivered to you as an educator. Like a lot of educators, like you get the content and you get the answer key, right? That's associated with the textbook, and now you got to teach to that. Or you have these state standards, right? So a lot of people feel like the content is fixed and that they can't change it. And so the problems are different. I actually want to walk through some demonstrations, and I've been practicing this all week, so please work with me, right? But it might look something like this. Hey, Jordan, can you cover AP US history in about 10 minutes? Oh, you talking to me? I was just about to go to lunch. Like, I didn't know, we needed a class covered. Like, this is beyond me, right? Like, I learned in preparing for this speech. Again, I'm in higher ed. So like, I'm in K through 12 mindset right now, because I know I have a lot of K through 12 educators with me. Like, there are people that have to come in from like central office into classrooms. They don't know their students. They barely know the content, right? And so what does that relationship look like? Like, how do we support those individuals? And then we also have stuff like ChatGPT, right? Technologies that are fundamentally transforming what it means for us to be teachers, let alone the actual pedagogy of it, like the future of our roles and how people in society outside of the classroom see us, right? And so these are some of the things that we're facing. And what I realized in really reflecting about my work thus far and talking to faculty about their courses, y'all, I've been in some teaching consultations where faculty just like break down in tears because this stuff is hard. And what I realized is that the academy needs humanizing. I'm gonna just let that settle for a moment. The academy needs humanizing. Jordan, what do you mean by humanizing? I mean things like grind culture. By a show of hands, who is teaching in elementary or middle school in the room? Wow, so most of the room. Yep, so everybody that just raised their hands, you know that elementary and middle school students do an amazing job of bringing their emotions into the classroom. Like, they are like full in emotion, like they will not hide anything. But as these young people go into high school, then they go into college, some might go into graduate programs, some might go straight into a profession. They are taught that their feelings don't matter because their feelings are seen as not productive. Where in the classroom is there room for frustration, for disbelief, for anger, for heartbreak? Like, these different emotions that students have that we know are connected to good classes. Like, some of the most transformative learning experiences I've walked out of the classroom angry. So what space is there for students to be able to have those experiences? And we police our students not only in just the policies that we have in our schools, but we even police our students' bodies, right? Like telling them to sit down constantly. No, you can't say that. No, you can't feel that in that way. You can't express yourself that way as a student. Like, these are the things that are arresting our students right now. And it's really centered around grind culture. A lot of it is because as educators, we have pressures on us to meet the state standards, to meet the standardized testing standards, right? And so often when we get caught up in what we're trying to chase, we impose that on our students, a lot of times self-consciously. And that's where we get terms like classroom management from. I don't know about you, but I've never learned anything under management. Like, how can you manage learn? Like, learning shouldn't be managed. If y'all want to snap, y'all could do that. If y'all want to clap, y'all could do that too. If y'all really feeling something, again, free your bodies, right? Free your bodies in here. But that's where we get stuff like classroom management from. I'm not trying to manage anybody's classroom. I'm trying to facilitate learning experiences. That's what I'm trying to do. This thing around upward mobility, we have some people in here that are trying to be assistant principals, superintendents someday. In really toxic schools, we have educators that are competing against each other for the quote unquote best students. We have educators that are like, nah, I need you in my class because you're going to raise the GPA for the class. You're going to read. And then what does that do to the students who have been historically underserved? And all of it is connected again to our upward mobility. And I know that MSET is helping to organize this conference. And so there's a lot of technology minds in the room. And I resonate with you. I'm about to graduate with a technology degree in May. Right? So we got a lot in common in the audience. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. But what I want to be weary of and what I want to warn us of today is this hyper focus on efficiency. I work with a lot of professors, and their one wish to me is to make their classroom smoother. They'll say things like, Jordan, my students won't talk. I just want them to talk. They'll say things like, is this technology going to help my conversations with students run smoother? And I don't know about you, but if you know about learning, learning is not smooth, right? Like learning is not linear, right? So we need to be wary of the technologies that we're trying to put into the classroom to make it more efficient. More importantly, more efficient for whom? More efficient for you as the educator or more efficient for your students? Because I'm all about effectiveness. Even if we don't get to the efficiency, I'd rather sacrifice that for effectiveness. And again, what is the purpose of an efficient classroom that fails to shake students to their core? I just want to leave that with somebody today. And so here's like the big reveal, right? Like here's where I like tie in like the whole purpose of my talk, right? Like thank y'all for rocking with me with the stories and everything. In order for us to have transformative learning experiences for all students, there needs to be an explicit focus on equity. Not an implicit focus, not like just like a social emotional learning kind of thing. Like there needs to be an explicit focus on having every student represented in their curricular and co-curricular experiences. But we don't get there without wellness. And when I say wellness, I'm not talking about spa days and vacations. When I say wellness, I'm talking about wellness that is resistive. I don't know who's familiar with the work of Tricia Hersey in this room, but I'm all about rest as a form of resistance to grind culture, to our busy culture, right? I gotta send this email. Like we gotta get through the content. Like I'm gonna skip over your brilliant thought. I'm gonna cut you off mid-sentence because we got content to get to. Like this is the kind of mindset that ruins our classrooms. And so again, if we want transformative learning for all of our students, there needs to be an explicit focus on equity. What exactly does equity look like? It looks like having difficult conversations at our professional development meetings, right? It looks like actually sitting down like one-on-one with the educator that you don't like, with the educator that doesn't teach the way that you teach, right? Like really understanding like where they get their practices from, where they get their learning goals from. At the end of the day, we're all gatekeepers in this room. Because if I'm teaching AP US history, I can't cover all of US history in 16 weeks. And the curriculum is already limited. So there are things that I'm intentionally deciding to include and exclude, which is fine, right? Like we all come into our biases, like we all come in with biases. I am actually anti-bias training. And that wasn't a mistake. I'm anti-bias training. It's because we all come into the classroom with bias. That's part of the reason why we're here. Like our biases keep us in it. Because I have like a particular disposition toward education. I have my own theory of change. I'm allowed to have that, right? Like that's where I get my passion from. That's where I share my stories from. But we can't let our biases suppress our students. And we can't let students' biases suppress each other, right? And so I just want to outline this one more time so that it's crystal clear with everybody. For more effective learning experiences, an explicit focus on equity, and an explicit focus on wellness in order to get to the equity. Because to disrupt systems of oppression, to disrupt how our classrooms usually are, we need to be creative and have the empathy to relate to the people that we need to do the work. I've never seen someone come up with a good idea exhausted. Right? Like we can't be exhausted doing this work. If we want all of our students to be successful, like the students that are already successful in our schools, like they'll probably be fine. Like they would actually benefit from an explicit focus on equity in a lot of ways. But if we want every single one of our students to be successful, this is the kind of framework that we need to develop. And there's literally research on this. This isn't just from personal experiences, someone who experienced a lot of mental health challenges in undergrad, right, related to my relationship with rest and sleep. There were literally times growing up where my mom would see me taking a nap, coming home from school, and like she would curse me out, right, for taking a nap. Because if she couldn't take a nap, I couldn't take one either, right? Like that's kind of how it was. And so I'm still trying to process a lot of that trauma. And what I realized in looking at the research is that the effects of sleep deprivation does have an effect on our emotional empathy. So this is important because not only do we need to connect with our students, but we need to connect with each other as practitioners across disciplines. So not just teachers, but the digital learning specialists, right? The learning analytics professionals, right? Like the folks that are at central office, like having the emotional and social stamina to carry those conversations when those conversations are not convenient, to be able to see things in our students when they're not convenient, to go down rabbit holes with our students because they're learning, and to allow that every now and again, right? And so we need to be rested in order to have these effects. And so I want to go a little bit deeper into classroom climate. Is everybody rocking with me so far? Does everything make sense? Okay, awesome. Thank you. And so I want to talk about classroom climate. If you're not familiar with what classroom climate is, it is the collection of social, intellectual, and emotional expectations of a learning environment. Again, which feelings are expected here? How are we expected to talk to each other in the classroom? When it comes to knowledge creation, which knowledge is upheld and valued and which ones aren't? Right? I love the work of Bettina Love. She has a book called We Want to Do More Than Survive. And in it, she talks about the educational survival complex. And she says, quote, "The educational survival complex is a system in which students are left learning to merely survive in schools that mimic and reproduce the current systems of oppression in our larger society." So again, this idea around grind culture, I have to grind in order to be successful, right? Like that message is actually harmful to our students. I actually want to show you a stat that blew my mind when I see it. So Gallup does an annual survey called the State of the Global Workplace. They survey over 120,000 workplace employees age 18 to 65 all across the world, about 90 countries represented. And in this study, what we learned is that 59% of the global workforce is quietly quitting. Jordan, what do you mean by quiet quitting? Doing the bare minimum at their job, like the bare minimum. 18% of people are actively trying to sabotage their jobs. Can you believe that? Like they are actively like messing up on their own project to make their coworker look bad. Like it's serious for these 18%. I worry about them, right? And so 77% of the global workforce is quietly quitting their work. And so when we talk about things like college and career readiness, is this what we're getting our students ready for? Like, is this what we're getting our students ready to do? So like when we teach about these things, when we teach about the skills that are going to allow students to be successful, we're talking about not just helping students get the job, but to actually transform the job once they're in it, because the job needs some transformation. These jobs are not sufficient. This society that we're in is not sufficient. Now, I know there are some people under the sound of my voice that were benefited by the education system, and I feel you. I was benefited in a lot of ways too. But I have intentionally decided to constantly surround myself with students who are struggling, with students who are speaking up, with students who are saying this is not sufficient for us. And the same goes for teachers, principals, and superintendents. This is a beautiful quote that came from a law professor that I've had the opportunity to work with and learn from recently. I don't believe in teaching through fear. So when we talk about things like cold calling in class to try to get students to engage, when we talk about things like high stakes testing that are huge at the college level, like fear has been used as a student engagement tactic forever. And like I work at Georgetown University, some of the most talented, brilliant students from around the world, and they're taking Adderall to stay up, to do their homework. That's how much work they had. That's how much pressure they have on them. So when we go into the classroom, we got to ask what kind of environment, what kind of tone are we setting for our students? And are we doing it through fear? And is that fear coded in messages like meritocracy? Is that fear coded in messages like, I'm just trying to prepare my students for the real world? The students are already in the real world. Like the students are already in it. And I trust my teaching more than I do capitalism. I trust my students' skills more than I do capitalism. I trust that the environment that I'm able to create in my classrooms where students can learn from each other, like uninterrupted, like that mastery of skill, like their ability to bring their own cultures into the classroom, like all of those things are going to prepare them for the stressful situations when they graduate. Because we've practiced it. We don't just talk about it. We don't just read about it. We don't just write papers about it. We practice with each other. And through that practice, I know that my students are going to be ready. And I'm not going to penalize them for that by making it 40% of their grade or 50% of their grade or 60% of their grade. Y'all rocking with me? Y'all following this so far? Okay, awesome. Now, just to make sure, climate, there's a lot of things around climate, right? So it's deciding competition versus collaboration. Climate is high stakes assignment versus low stakes assignments. Climate is things like open and closed feedback loops. Do you wait until the last week of the semester to collect feedback from your students? Or are you doing it on day one before the class even starts? And when you get that feedback and you implement it, are you getting more feedback from your students? Are you having a conversation with your students? No, I had this assignment because I had these learning goals for you. How do you feel about that? What are some of the goals that you're bringing into this environment? Oh, you feel challenged right now. I understand that, but these are the types of skills that I want to develop. So like, I want to help us navigate these challenges together. Like, these are the types of conversations that we have with our students. We've got things like subordination versus criticism. Are we teaching our students to be disruptive? The reason why I'm standing on this stage today is because I asked the disruptive question. I asked the question that a lot of people don't want to ask. Right, and I was able to challenge our current systems around education, to challenge our current social systems. Why? Because students like me and millions of other students need it. And it's not just the black students, right? Like, it's the white students, it's the able-bodied students, it's all of the students that have these quote unquote privileges. Like, everybody needs these types of conversations, right? And then it's preparation versus transformation. Are we preparing students for fields and opportunities that already exist? Or are we preparing students to be transformers once they get into those opportunities? Are we training our students to be leaders in their respective fields? Because leadership is not just assimilation into the culture, but leadership is getting students to design things that are new, because we need some new stuff. Like, y'all seen the stats that I put up here. The stats don't lie. We need some new stuff, y'all. I want to say that trauma is not a rite of passage. A lot of us in this room have been through academic hazing, and that stuff is real, and master's and PhD programs, right? And again, we justify it by saying, oh, I'm just preparing my students for what's to come. I want my students to be prepared, but we have to trust our students, right? Like, we have to tell our students about the environments that we're going into. We have to try to get them to empathize with the people that are creating those circumstances so that they can understand how to disrupt them when they get the positions. Because when our students become the CEOs and when they become the politicians, when they become the superintendents, we can't let them share this message, right? Like, trauma, we can't let them share trauma in the name of work ethic, in the name of preparing students. And so I just wanted to cement that. So I want to come back to this thing right here. It starts with learning. If we want all of our students to learn, we need educational equity. And in order to get educational equity, we all need to be well. Why? Because ideas that disrupt our current systems, ideas that liberate and free our students, ideas that are generative, that are creative, that are innovative. I know that's a favorite word for some of the people that are technology minded. If we want our students to innovate, they can't innovate when they're exhausted. And we can't perpetuate that exhaustion. And part of that is teaching ourselves how to not be exhausted. Like, one of the things that I've tried to adopt myself as somebody who's a full-time entrepreneur, I'm a part-time graduate student at a master's degree program at one of the most elite institutions in the country. I work full-time, right? Like, I've got a lot of stuff going on. One of the things that I do to try to reclaim my connection to my body is to, like, really implement intuitive eating. Like, really, like, I don't believe in working lunches. I know a lot of people do that in here. You type in and you munching. You type in and you munching, type in munching. Right? I choose not to do that. That email does not have to be sent at 2:09 p.m. It could wait until 9 a.m. the next morning. It's okay. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to eat. I'm going to reconnect with my body. Why? Because when I meet that faculty member who's stressed out, who's working for the World Bank and is teaching an international affairs class, and they're stressed out and they come to I need to be able to understand their pain. I need to be able to understand what they're feeling. And in order to do that, I need to understand what I'm feeling. We can't be culturally responsive to our students until we're culturally responsive to ourselves. Right, I took that from Dr. Chris Emden. I can't claim that one. That was good, right? That was good. Okay, I want to do a quick activity with you all. We're almost done, right? I'm going to show some scenarios, and I want you to act based on your level of concern. If the scenario is something that concerns you, I just want you to raise one hand. If you're really concerned about it, I want you to raise two hands just like this, nice and high. And if it keeps you up at night, I want you to give me jazz hands like that. Okay, all right, let's do it. Okay, conversations about difficult topics. Race, gender, sexuality, religion. Stressed, really stressed. Oh my God, what am I doing here? Okay, cool. Thank you for the transparency. Handling student interpersonal conflicts. So we're talking about fights, verbal arguments. Stressed, really stressed. Get me out of here. Okay, great. So some really stressed. A few get me out of here. Okay, you failing in the classroom, not your students, but you making mistakes in the classroom. This might look like making your classrooms inaccessible, saying the wrong thing in front of your students. Okay, a lot of jazz hands for that one. Getting reported to leadership by parents, by students. How much does this concern you? Okay, cool. Thank y'all for doing that with me. I just want to say that I need you. So these things are hard. These are the types of things that I want us to talk about through this conference today. There's going to be a lot of stuff about technology and AI and Google Slides and Microsoft and all of these amazing technologies that are going to really support our teaching practices. But what's transformative is how we navigate some of the things that we just expressed concern about. That determines whether we actually use the technologies in the ways that they were meant to be used to support students or not. And what I want to say to somebody is that being an educator now in 2024, arguably, is more important than in any other time in human history. Why is that? Because the students are able to bring in more content than ever before from TikTok, from YouTube University. But what we do in this room, YouTube University can't do. What we do in this room, ChatGPT can't do. Facilitating those conversations, asking the students the right question at the right time, being able to emotionally connect with your students as they learn. And our students have lost this over time. That's why I hear students say things like, is it a society possible without college? Is a society possible without high school? Why do I have to learn this? It's because of the educational trauma that they're facing, and we can solve it in this room through the ways that we teach. And so I just want to say that you are important. No matter what the little 14-year-old says about how ChatGPT is going to take over your job and like all of that stuff, right? Like, you are important, and we have to be able to, again, sing that song and communicate our importance. But first we have to internalize it. And so I just want to start with that. Equity is a slow game of high intensity. I don't know who needs to hear this, but so often we go to these conferences and we get excited. I want to use this right away. I've gathered all of these tools. I've taken so many I've got 50 screenshots. I've got 50 pictures. I've got 50 things that like my Google Drive is full. It's overflowing. I need to drain some of my storage. It's crazy. All the things that I've collected at this conference. And we're so quick to try to implement it. We're so quick to try to use it. And that's fine. We can use it, but just be reflective about the climate and the content that we're also bringing in along with the pedagogical practices. And so I want to do one last thing with you. I want everybody to close their eyes again for a second. Y'all trust me now, so it should be cool, right? Close your eyes for a second. And I want you to think about your favorite song. I see people stressed out already. Not like we have multiple favorite songs. That's fine. Just pick one of them. Pick one of your favorite songs ever. And I want you to think about the first time you ever heard that song. Where were you when you heard that song? Where were you at in your life? What point in your life did you hear this song? What was the environment like? Were you in a car? Were you at the beach? Were you at a party? Were you in your bedroom? Who was with you? Was it a significant other? Were you by yourself? Were you with friends? Were you with family? What was the aroma like in the room? Did you smell alcohol? Did you smell food? Did you smell some other things that I'm not going to name in this room? What did you experience in that moment? I just want us to be anchored in that experience. Try to put yourself physically in that environment just for a few seconds. Just experience it. All right, great. You all could come back to me. How was that? That felt pretty good, right? Like even the times where we hear our favorite songs and we're going through trouble, we're going through hardship. It feels cathartic to kind of go back to those moments, right? And I did that because no matter what your favorite song was, I guarantee that your favorite song became your favorite song because these three things lined up. Let me paint the picture for you. The environment is the climate. When you heard that song in your car, the environment was just right for you. When you heard that song at the party, the vibes was flowing. Everything, like you had your best friends there. You had a little bit of alcohol in your system, right? Like everything, like the environment was perfect, right? The lyrics made sense. The content aligned. If I'm listening to a sad song at a party, it's not going to vibe right, right? And so the lyrics made sense. And then the voice, the pedagogy. The voice is how the singer actually delivered the song. It resonated with you to some extent. Now, I'm a young black man from Baltimore. So the fact that Luke Combs has one of my favorite songs right now is highly unlikely. Okay, but I'm so serious. I've done this activity with myself and Fast Car by Luke Combs. I'm like really vibing with that. Anybody else vibing with that song? Now I will say, this is different from what I grew up on. I grew up on some Mary J. Blige, some Keisha Cole, some Alicia Keys. I'm sitting in the back of my mother's car, like jamming. All right, so that's kind of like my background, right? When I listen to hip hop, I listen to Kendrick, I listen to Mobb Deep, listen to Tribe Called Quest, Jay-Z, right? Like that's usually my vibe. So the fact that Luke Combs is in my Serato was like weird to me. But the first time I heard Fast Car, I was driving. I was in an open road. It was my first year of grad school at Georgetown University. I lived 4 hours away from my longtime girlfriend, Lauren, at the time, who I'm still with today. I was working so hard in grad school, trying to prove myself. First black man in the history of my program. Like I've got like huge amount of stress. I'm living alone in Washington, D.C., one of the most expensive places to live in the country. So I resonated with the lyrics of this song, even though this man isn't from my culture, right? Like the culture is different, but I resonated. One, because the environment was set. I was in the car, I was alone, I had my Bose speakers. If I would have heard Fast Car at the gym and like an AirPod fell out, like maybe it wouldn't have been the same experience, right? I'm gonna go back to this. The lyrics of the song made sense. If you really listen to the lyrics of Fast Car, it's about making something of yourself, right? It's about like working hard. It's about like confiding in the validation of the people around you. Like you trying to fit in to a particular group, trying to fit in to society, right? Like I felt that as a first year graduate student at Georgetown, as a first generation college student, right? And then the voice. There's a lot of Lukes in country music apparently. So if Luke Bryan were to sing this song, I probably wouldn't have vibed with it. Now, if Beyonce would have sang this song, maybe we're talking about something different, right? Like Beyonce just went over the country. Maybe she would have sung the song. It might have been a little bit different, right? But what I want to say, the whole reason why I did all of this is because the same formula of our favorite songs are the same formula of our classrooms. So the emotional experience that I just created for you all, I envision a time where when we ask students about the most important things that they learn in their classroom, when our kids come home to us, I don't have kids, but I know some of y'all do. When our kids come home to us and we ask them, how was school today? What did you learn? They have that emotional experience. When students look back over their lives and they said, what were the classes that transformed you? What were some of the most important lessons you've learned? They can rely on experiences like the ones that we just had because all of these things were in alignment. So what I want to challenge us today as educators to do is to make our schools and our classrooms less like schools and more like songs. My name is Jordan Davis. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for rocking with me. I appreciate y'all. And that was fun, right? That was fun. Now, I'm all about feedback loops. I talked about that earlier. So if you could give me feedback on the work that I've just done with you all, that would be fantastic. This might only take about 60 seconds to complete. We've got about maybe like a minute or two. Is that fine, Tracy, if people like take some time and just fill this out real quick? And then I'm giving a workshop on trauma-informed pedagogy right after this if anybody wants to join me. So please take some time to fill this out. Thank y'all so much. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. I'm gonna talk to y'all soon too.